People always ask me how I went from being a struggling junior developer, constantly feeling like an imposter, to someone who finally felt confident in their career. It's a common question, and I think everyone expects a really specific answer. They expect me to say I learned a new framework, or I got a certain certificate, or I went to some exclusive boot camp. But the truth, it wasn't any of that. It wasn't a shiny new tool or a piece of paper. It was one skill, just one, and it changed absolutely everything for me. When I first started as a developer, I felt like a fraud every single day. I'm not exaggerating. I'd wake up with this pit in my stomach, dreading the moment someone would realize I didn't belong. On the surface, I was doing all the right things. I memorized syntax until my eyes glazed over. I watched hours and hours of tutorials, nodding along like I understood. I read documentation that felt like a foreign language. But when I got to work, when I was faced with a real task, I would just freeze. It felt like everyone else in the room had this secret knowledge I was missing. They seemed so sure of themselves, so decisive. They'd talk about architecture and dependencies, and I'd just sit there, nodding, praying no one would ask for my opinion. I felt like a mistake waiting to be exposed. Every bug I created, which was a lot, felt like a personal failure. Every code review felt like a judgment on my intelligence. I kept having this recurring thought, this voice in my head saying, maybe you're just not cut out for this. Maybe you don't have the developer brain everyone talks about. I was convinced it was a matter of time before I'd be gently told that this just wasn't the career for me. I was exhausted, not just from the work, but from the constant fear. One night, after a particularly long day of feeling completely and utterly overwhelmed, I came home and opened my laptop. But for the first time in a long time, it wasn't to code. I didn't have the energy to stare at another error message. I opened it to figure out why I was always so stuck. Why did I keep hitting the same walls over and over again? Why did learning feel so slow and so painful, like I was trying to run through mud? And as I sat there, just thinking, I had a realization. It wasn't a sudden flash of lightning, but more like a slow, quiet dawn. I wasn't struggling because I lacked intelligence. I wasn't struggling because I was lazy or because I wasn't trying hard enough. I was struggling because I lacked a skill. A fundamental skill that, strangely enough, nobody ever really teaches you in a tutorial or a classroom. The skill of problem solving. That was it. Problem solving, not coding. Not memorizing frameworks, not knowing keyboard shortcuts. I'm talking about real, fundamental problem solving. The ability to look at a massive, terrifying challenge and break it down into small, manageable pieces. The ability to understand the root cause of an issue, not just slap a temporary fix on it. The skill of thinking step by step, logically, instead of just panicking and throwing random solutions at the wall until something sticks. It was the ability to stop my emotional reaction of "oh no, I broke it," and replace it with a logical one. Okay, what is this trying to tell me? It wasn't a glamorous skill. It wasn't trendy. You don't see expert problem solver on a resume. But I realized it was the entire foundation I was missing. I had been trying to build a house without any concrete. So, I started practicing it, deliberately. It was a conscious shift in how I approached my work. Instead of immediately Googling an error message the second it appeared, I forced myself to stop and actually read it, to try and understand it. Instead of copying and pasting code from a solution online, I tried to rewrite it from memory, forcing myself to internalize the logic. Most importantly, instead of rushing to get a task done, I slowed down. I gave myself permission to think. And every time something broke, which still happened all the time, I started asking myself a different set of questions. Not why am I so bad at this, but what is this really trying to tell me? What did I expect to happen, and what actually happened? What's the difference between those two things? Slowly, little by little, something started to change. I wasn't just learning code anymore, I was learning how to think. It was like I was building a new muscle in my brain. The change in my work life wasn't overnight, it was gradual. But one day, I looked up and realized things just made sense in a way they never had before. Bugs that once terrified me and sent me into a spiral of self-doubt now looked like puzzles. They were interesting. Debugging sessions, which used to be my personal nightmare, turned into challenges I actually wanted to solve. I started asking better questions in team meetings. Instead of hiding my confusion to avoid looking stupid, I would say things like, "Can you walk me through the logic here? I want to make sure I understand the flow before I start," and people respected that. My confidence didn't come from suddenly knowing everything. That's impossible. My confidence came from knowing that I had a system to figure things out, even when I started with zero knowledge. I remember there was this one project. It was the kind of project that would have absolutely crushed me just a few months earlier. It had complicated business logic, impossible-seeming deadlines, and layers upon layers of legacy code that nobody fully understood. The old me would have panicked. I would have been completely paralyzed by the sheer scale of it, but this time, I didn't. I just looked at it, took a deep breath, and started breaking it down. Piece by piece, I made diagrams, I wrote down questions. I isolated the smallest possible part one could work on first. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't just surviving the work, I was leading it. I was the one explaining the complexities to others. That's when I knew. That's when I realized this one skill had completely changed me, not just as a developer, but as a professional. Once my problem-solving ability improved, everything else just followed. It was like a career explosion. I was trusted with bigger, more important tasks. My senior colleagues started coming to me for help with tricky bugs. I wasn't seen as the junior who was trying his best anymore. I was seen as someone reliable, someone who could get things done. And with that trust came opportunities, promotions, lead roles on new projects, the kind of respect from my peers that I used to think I'd never be able to earn. And it all stemmed from that one decision to stop focusing on what to learn and start focusing on how to think. If I could go back in time and tell my younger, struggling self one thing, it wouldn't be learn React faster, or study algorithms every night, or master this new framework before anyone else. It would be this: learn how to think like a developer. Learn how to solve problems, because frameworks change. Languages evolve and are replaced. The hot new tech of today will be the legacy system of tomorrow, but the skill of problem solving? That is the one skill that makes you valuable no matter the tech stack, no matter the job title, no matter the environment. It's the foundation of everything we do. It's timeless. So if you're on your journey right now, if you feel overwhelmed by the endless sea of tutorials, if you feel stuck on a problem you can't solve, if you feel like you're falling behind everyone else, please remember this: you don't need to know everything. You don't need to memorize the entire internet. You need one skill, just one: the ability to approach a problem calmly, to break it down into its smallest parts, and to figure it out, step by logical step. That's what changed my entire developer career. And I know, without a doubt, that it can change yours too. It won't happen overnight. It's not magic, but slowly, consistently, and permanently. One skill, one shift in your thinking. One decision to focus on how you think, not just what you know. That's all it took. Thanks for listening. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.